Okay, people. So now it's January 23rd, 2019. Do you know how hard it is to work on a nonprofit when you're fucking depressed? And you've got all this shit that you have to do that you don't want to do. And you got to remain positive for the nonprofit and act like nothing else is going on in your life other than promoting the mandate of the nonprofit. As if you've got time to work on a nonprofit. As if anyone really appreciates what you work on anyway, right? In terms of a nonprofit that doesn't have the ability to give out all the time things, right? All the time. Right? In terms of being a successful nonprofit. Anyway, this is what I'm going to do. This is my contribution. I got the 100-year-old books. We've done this before. It is 6:30 in the morning. One day, Andre will look back on these books, well, videos, and he'll say, that was my Nana reading books. So if not for the nonprofit, then for my grandchildren, 100-year-old books, by the time they become 50, these books will be 150 years old. And don't forget, the ink runs in these ones. You get a little bit of water on them and the ink is running. I'm just mixing them up like they were a deck of cards. I don't know how I'm going to do the whole batch as I pull them out one by one. But we're just going to see what the books have to say. There, we'll just stop with that one. I didn't cheat, people. I'm not cheating. See, it's all mixed up. I don't know what is what. Turn them upside down. Not like you can see what's on the binder, right? They run consecutively in terms of like page 1 all the way up to, well, we'll find out how many pages in the end. So we'll just stop with this one, okay? Here. I don't know. What else are you going to do at 6:30 in the morning when you want to go back to bed, but you know you won't fall asleep? I was going to go in my sewing room, but it's as if I have a lot of time to read this kind of stuff. All right. I don't know what book it is. They don't have it on the binder. And if they do, I don't see it. I'm going to try and get to the doctor here to get another referral for my eyes. And I'm going to see if I can get glasses specifically for the computer, because these are not working that great anymore, people. My eyes are too tired. Right. Tisha brought me a different screen here, so I don't know if it's the screen or if it's my eyes or if it's both. Because since I've gotten this screen, it's been harder to see with. But besides that point, yeah, see, I can't read nothing with these things unless I go really, really close and crank up my neck like this. So what do we got? Yeah, I'm looking. I see no number. Wait, what's this? I see a number. Barely. It says 1. We're still on book 1, people. I want to know what's in book 3. Anyway, this is how we do it. Let me just go like this. You can hear the pages still crackling open in there. All right. We'll take it more to the back. This is what I found. What is it? What are we talking about tonight? What is that? I don't even know what that is. Is it upside down? Oh, sorry. Here, we'll do this again. There we go. That's a little better. 100 years ago. These are the things they were talking about 100 years ago. Okay, so what do we got? Single span and many spans. What's a span? Okay. Oh, my Lord. First one. Obviously to do with bridges, right? The bridge across the Rhine of Koblenz, Prussia, shows us the value of the form of arch which John Rennie first used. Although we have only one great span here, the roadway is particularly flat, not steep as those over the old single arch bridges were. This is because the arch is shaped like half an egg. Okay, I don't know. This is in the beginning of the book. It's not the back of the book because I had the book upside down. So we're actually only on page 36. All right. In the beginning of this chapter, since I started halfway through it, is talking about bridges. So, since we're talking about bridges, let's see where it starts in terms of that particular section. So we're on page 37, 36 and 37. You can see. Right? I just marked the page for now, so my memory is not that great. It might forget. And we're going to go all the way to, wow, footpaths in the air. And the chapter prior to it, oh, something fell. I don't know what that was. And here they're talking about Native history, art. Right, and then it goes, the land before the white man came. There's that section. That's not what we're reading on, though. We're reading about bridges. And then the bridges start right there. That's where the bridges start. So that's where we're going to start. And then, I don't know, this fell out of the book. It's just a cover. And then, since we're doing bridges, oh, I don't know where the book is. I have a book here that you can do string art with, in terms of you have a board, you put nails into it, and then you run the string through to make art. I have a book like that around here somewhere. Right? I need to find it and do that with Andre so I can get him involved with this book as I'm reading it online. Maybe I can get him to do some string art, and then I can get him involved with the book as well, versus wait till he grows up and he goes and watches one of my videos and he'll be like, that's my Nana, you know? So there's quite a few pages from 22 to 24 all the way up to, this is a big section. So it's not all going to get done in one night. Oh, here we go. Isn't this interesting? This is a coincidence, people. Now, this is a coincidence. Did we just not have the blood moon like yesterday and the day before? 21st and the 22nd. Today is what? The 23rd. That's right. Look at that. That's the next section after the bridges. First, we're going to do the bridges, and then maybe we'll do this one. But I just want to point this out. What does it say? Do you see? We're talking about the sun and the moon and the tides. All right. No, we just had a blood moon like yesterday. Right. It's not that I don't believe in coincidence. I just know that it's very random, not planned. That was not planned. Okay. Anyway, the Great Steel Arc across Long Island Sound. For those who don't travel, such as myself, I wonder if this bridge is still standing. Might be something to Google up. Right? And then it goes on to say for this picture, right? This picture shows the Hell Gate. Okay. Who's going to hell today? Somebody is on their way. This picture shows the Hell Gate. That's what you call ironic, considering how my life is and what's going on, and just the fact that my daughter's urn is sitting right there, and you know, everything's in limbo, right? And there's some very bad things going on, right? You know, like anyway. The picture shows the Hell Gate Railway Bridge over Long Island Sound just before its completion. When was this book written, and when was this bridge completed? The Great Steel Arc across Long Island Sound. Right. I'm not rushing for you at 6:45 in the morning when I should be sleeping. I'm doing this for my grandchildren and the nonprofit. I don't ever really get to work on a nonprofit in a positive way. It's kind of hard to be positive when you have so many negative things in your life, so I'm trying to stay positive. This is a section that we pulled out of 3 books. We're still on book 1, and for some reason we went almost to the very beginning of the book in a random order. And we're talking about the Long Island Sound Bridge that's called the Hell's Gate, the Hell Gate. And it was completed, I'm not too sure, but the book I'm getting it from, 1911, copyright 1911, so it's over 100 years old. So that bridge, if it's still existing, is at least 100 years old. So that's something to look up on Google to see if it's still standing. Right? The distance between the smokestack of the steamer and the floor of the bridge shows the great height above the water. The bridge is part of a long viaduct, and the structure which can see through the bridge is another part of the same viaduct. The beautiful curve which brings this part of the viaduct around until it is almost at a right angle with the bridge is in itself a great triumph of engineering. This bridge is nearly a quarter of a mile long between the piers, and the arch is the longest steel arch in the world. So, as I look for my string art, right, to get Andre involved with bridges and the engineering of bridges, because you can do that with string art, we're going to Google up this bridge to see if it's still standing, which it probably is. Right? And then the next one goes on to, we're only on page 23 of the series, people. One of the most beautiful bridges in the world across the river in Scotland. So here's another bridge you can probably Google. Just to see if it's still standing. This is a very long chapter. So anyway, I'll read one page, page 23. Footpaths in the air. No one can say, here we go. No one can say who built the first bridge. Nature herself would no doubt be man's first teacher. Man, I have a cold. Man would find a path across a chasm by clinging to a twisted vine, or he would see a ready-made bridge consisting of a fallen tree trunk across a stream. Those were the first bridges, and they were the sort which would have to be made for hundreds of years. One day a genius arose, who dumped high heaps of stone in a line across a stream, Genius. What I really need to do as I do this, because I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that word correctly or you using it in the right context. And that's the point of this exercise, right? When in doubt, look it up. But I'm not going to look it up right now. But I wrote it down to look it up. Anyway, then came a long, long while afterwards came bigger real bridges. So one day a genius arose, we'll just say a genius, right? Arose, who dumped high heaps of stone in a line across a stream, and on top placed slabs of slate or stone or fallen trees. Then a long, long while afterwards came bigger, real bridges. The Romans were the first to learn how to make these. Romans. Back to Romans. Always Romans. What is it with this book? It's Romans, Romans, Romans. I wonder if it's going to be like that through the whole series. Because so far, every time I've done this, 3 times, and it's all Roman. It always goes back to a Roman. Ever notice that? That's what you call social programming. History writing itself. Because if you go into other cultures will tell you that's not true. Right? Go into the Chinese culture, go into the Hindu culture, go into the, the native people will tell you, right? No. There's bridges over there that we made 5,000 years ago. Anyway. They built splendid bridges on arches, some of which exist today. Men had a long time to wait before they got good bridges in England. The 12th century had almost ended when the first great London Bridge was built. There were wooden houses and shops on it, but these were always catching fire and damaging the bridge, and they were all pulled down before the bridge was destroyed. Well, I bet that's a little piece of history you didn't know about. I didn't know about that. The book has no reason to lie about it. At least that part, right? In terms of pre-programming. Because when they say Romans were the first to make the bridge, is it a particular bridge that they're talking about? Because in the very beginning of the chapter, they admit that nature had already pre-built bridges in the context of crossing over from point A to point B. So if nature did it and nature was the first, who's to say Romans were the second? Outside of the architect that was involved with the building of those bridges. Hey, this beats reading the Criminal Code of Canada right now, people, because I could be reading that. It's a whole different kind of reading. A great reform was made in bridge building by John Rennie. It had been customary to make the arches very high, so that when a bridge had only one arch, the roadway sloped sharply up on one side and down on the other. But John Rennie made his arches not like half of a circle, but like half of an egg length wise, but half of an egg cut lengthwise. So versus going half of a circle, it was on an oval instead. There still existed a famous single arch bridge of the old type of famous bridge at Pontypridd in Glamorgan Shire. Glamorgan Shire. The first bridge there had 3 arches, but the river washed them away. Then the builder, William Edwards, put up another in its place, but it had only 1 arch and soon fell. So, this must be why they run them consecutively. There's an arch, there's an arch, there's an arch, versus one big arch. All right. That's one big arch, at least in that picture. Here, there's several. Right. Edward discovered the cause of its fall. There had been too much weight on the supports and not enough in the center. By being too light on top, the crown of the bridge was forced up and made to fall. Then he built a third bridge in which the haunches were lighter and the top heavier. That bridge still stands after being used for more than 150 years. When the 18th century was drawing to a close, men began to build bridges of cast iron. But engineers soon found that, though cast iron can bear great pressure, it will not bear much pull. It cannot be easily crushed by a weight, but it can soon be snapped by weights with pull at the two ends. So they then used wrought iron, which cannot easily be pulled apart. See, Andre has his own little kind of work craft room now, right? So I think what I'm going to do, obviously I'm going to look for that string art book so that we can make a picture of a bridge, because it shows you how to do it there. I just don't know where I put the book. It's around here somewhere. And then I wonder if we can make a little bridge, just kind of like a little, get a little platform and build a little bridge so that we can talk about what I'm reading. I think that would be fun. And then if I do that with him, he'll have that memory. And then when he gets older and he sees this video, he'll be like, oh, I remember Nana made a bridge with me. I still have my wall art, my picture that I made. So that when he watches this video, it will be more meaningful for him, right? Because I'm desperately trying to have a normal life here, people. Right? This is what normal people do. They do positive things that, can produce positive results, and, they're not committing any crimes and not doing anything bad. This is nothing bad. This is normal, but this is something normal that people can do, that they should do in their life. This is what brings quality of living into people's lives, right? Taking time out to get in touch with history and making plans to build things with your children or your grandchildren, or, And this gives me an idea now, right? So now that I have the idea, I'm going to take this book, take it into Uncle John's room, and we're going to start working on bridges for a little while. And then eventually I'll come back and I'll say, look at the little bridge that Andre and I made. And hopefully we'll understand the basic, because what I just read, to be honest with you, I kind of went in one ear and out the other, because I'm not really wanting to sit and think about the physics around building bridges at 7 o'clock in the morning, right? But it's greasing the wheels, you know what I mean? It's greasing the wheels, and it's taking off the pressure of the other stuff that I have to read and focus on, right? Because, this is mild compared to this other stuff that I have to focus on. But it's interesting, though, because, it's educational and it can be fun, right? You can make things with it, right? So anyway, When the 18th century was drawing to a close, men began building bridges of cast iron. But engineers soon found that though cast iron can bear great pressure, it cannot bear much pull. It cannot be easily crushed by a weight, but it can soon be snapped by weights which pull at the two ends. So they then used wrought iron, which cannot easily be pulled apart. That served until steel came into use in the 19th century. The first great bridge built of wrought iron was the Britannia Bridge, which crosses the Minion Straits in northern Wales. The builder was Robert Stephenson, of whom we read elsewhere. He made a huge square tube of iron at the top, iron the paper is very thick. I feel like I have 2 or 3 pieces of paper. It's nice paper. The sides, iron at the bottom, and through this tube of iron, the trains passed. To increase the strength of the bridge, he made the iron at the top and bottom tube shaped instead of solid. To increase the strength of the bridge, he made the iron at the top and bottom tube shaped instead of solid, because it would better stand the pull of the weight. The great iron tubes in which the train crosses the water. These tubes are built on huge columns of masonry, one being founded on an island halfway across the water, and the others on the land at the sides. As ships were constantly passing, it was impossible to pull up great scaffolds on which to build up the ironwork. So Stephen had the 2 tubes, nearly 500 yards long, built in 4 sections on shore. When it was ready, the big tubes were floated on many boats and ferried out to the towers. As the tide went down, the boats gradually sank, and the tubes weighing 5,000 tons each came to rest in grooves prepared for them in the masonry. Then the boats were drawn away, and the enormous masses of iron were hoisted up to their proper height, 100 feet above the water, by great engines. One of the finest of all bridges is the great steel cantilever bridge. That's another word. Let me write it down. This is what I do when I work on my other paperwork. I have to look up words sometimes. A cantilever is copied from the oldest of simplest bridge. A cantilever is copied from the oldest of simple bridges. If 2 trees lean over the water from different sides of a stream, we have only to run a plank from the end of one trunk to the end of the other to make a simple cantilever bridge. That is one way of applying it. The other is to consider the cantilever a bracket. Secured firmly at one end, a bracket will bear a shelf with a heavy weight of books, and the steel cavaliers forming a bridge are merely huge brackets. The best example is the Great Forth Bridge. So you can look up bridges. All right. how the Great Fourth Bridge was built. There had been many schemes for bridging the River Forth, and at last the work was begun by Sir Thomas Booch. But suddenly, one dreadful night in the winter of 1879, part of the Tay Bridge was blown down, carrying with it into the river a trainload of people. Everybody in the train was drowned, and the country was horrified. Sir Thomas Booch died, broken-hearted, and the fourth bridge was designed by Sir John Fowler and Sir Benjamin Baker. So this is going on to the fourth bridge, I guess, in one particular area. They had to cross two shift channels of water. There is an island in the middle, but on each side of it, there were flows of channels of water deep and swift and 1,700 feet abroad. It was impossible to sink piers in these channels, so the central pier was founded on the island, and two others were built near the shore. The cantilevers, of which there are 3 pairs, carrying the bridge across the 2 wide sketches of water, they are each 1,360 feet long, and the 3 stretching out towards each other leave a space of 350 feet to be covered between the ends of the first and second, and a similar space between the ends of the second and third. Here, ordinary steel girders are used, in order that ships may pass under it. The bridge is made 150 feet above high tide, and its top parts are 361 feet above the water. The fourth bridge has been surpassed by the bridge which had been built across the St. Lawrence River near Quebec. This cantilever bridge has 2 great arms, each 580 feet long and very strong, which carry between them the weight of central span 640 feet long as a height of 100 feet above high water. How kites and rockets are used for building great bridges. The best suspension bridge in England is at Clifton. This is 702 feet across and 31 feet wide. It is more than 200 feet above the River Avon, and it is said that the first string attached to the rope which pulled across the cable was sent over by a kite. A still stranger way was adopted for starting the Great Bridge across the River Zambezi in South Africa. The bridge is the highest in the world, 400 feet above the water, and runs from cliff to cliff. So they had to fire a rocket fastened to the end of a cord. The rocket took the cord across the cord. The rocket took the cord across. The cord was used for hauling across a wire, and the wire was used to pull over a small cable. On this, a truck crossed carrying the main cable of the bridge, which is 200 yards long and the greatest engineering wonder in South Africa. So I'm going to let Andre Google some of these bridges on the computer. And then I have this little thing that he can make like a little presentation with as he learns about particular bridges. Right? So that what I'm reading doesn't go in vain. considering that no one's watching and I'm entertaining myself. The two halves are pulled up, working on enormous... Am I gaslighting myself here, people? Am I living in a fantasy thinking that I'm working on a nonprofit and making a difference? In terms of being in the here and now, reading about old bridges. The two halves are pulled up, working on enormous hinges, and the ship passes through. The great city of New York has many bridges. Oh, I feel like sneezing here pretty soon. I have this cold coming. But those that we know are best are the four built over the East River and the stretch of water which separates Manhattan Island, on which the center of the city is built, from Long Island. Isn't that where we started off with? Long Island? That's where we started from the beginning. Right? Do you see? That's the beginning of the chapter. That right there. Where are we reading? No, I lost my spot up here. We're on page 25 now. Now we're over here. Okay. Of these four bridges, the most famous, and indeed one of the most famous bridges in the world, is the one known as Brooklyn Bridge. We're going to look up Brooklyn Bridge. How the famous Brooklyn Bridge was built. This is good for me to read this anyway, because when I start this little project with Andre, I'll kind of know what I'm doing, right? In terms of, okay, this is how we're going to do it. This is why I want to show him this book. Because it has other little projects in here, people, right? There's other little projects in here that as you come along them, right? See, like here's one right here. Maybe I'll mark this off. We can do two things. Here's one right here. No, can't see. Right there. Do you see? I don't know what this project is, but it's something. I'll mark that off. I gotta be careful what I put in there. Okay. Oh yes, and Andre and I are gonna start making music. We're starting to write songs. I noticed there was a keyboard there with notes on it. I just marked it off. You can see. Okay. How the famous Brooklyn Bridge was built. This bridge was commenced by Mr. J.A. Roebling, who built the first suspension bridge over Niagara River. He was the first man to use wire cables instead of chains to suspend a bridge, and he used this plan for Brooklyn Bridge. Thousands of steel wires were used in each giant cable by layering them parallel with one another over the tops of towers built on the land. The wires were clambered into 19 strands for each cable, and each strand contains nearly 300 wires. The strands were then wrapped around and around with steel wire to bind them into a cable and at the same time form a flexible covering. The combined strength of the wires in 4 cables is sufficient to give the great structure strength to stand up under the strain of the enormous traffic that daily passes to and from across it on electric trains, steel railways, motor cars, and on foot. So there's a few things crossing his bridge. After Mr. Roebling's death, his son finished the bridge, whose airy grace gives little hint of its immense strength. There are 2 other suspension bridges across the East River, and one of them, the Williamsburg Bridge, is peculiar because instead of being covered by a winding wire, the wires of which the cables are formed are clamped together at regular intervals of bands of steel from which the suspenders which support the roadway are hung. The sections made in this way are covered by steel plates which overlap like armor. The Manhattan Bridge, which is also a suspension bridge, is longer than either of the others, but is not so interesting. The Queensboro Bridge is a cantilever bridge, which is noted for the fact that the cantilevers do not carry a suspension span, but it is where lock arms over the water. Oh my Lord. This is possible because the engineer was able to build 2 piers on an island in the river. You have to get into the geometry in terms of how the land basin structure is out there just to be able to understand what they're saying here, right? But it gives you an idea of what to look for in terms of bridge building and how the different types of suspension and materials that are used as they're working with that suspension, right? Bring in the strength of the bridge, right? So how that relates today in terms of books being flipped around just to see what they have to say. Bridges are being built. That's what's happening here, people. Bridges are being built. It's just a matter of how we build them now, right? A great steel arch which carries a railway. Okay, last section, and then we go on to pictures. Another great bridge in New York is a railway bridge, which is part of a long viaduct that carries a railway from Long Island across 2 islands in the river and onto the mainland. The bridge itself is an immense steel arch which spans a distance of 1,000 feet across and carries 4 railways tracks 140 feet high above water. We gain some idea of its size when we are told that it cost over $10,000 to drive in the rivets that hold its beams together. These beams are 7 feet across, some are 10.5 feet deep. Naturally, the towers which have to stand up against the push or thrust of all this weight must be very strong. And so we are not surprised to learn that there are 140 feet, that they are 140 feet one way and over 100 feet the other, and that their foundations are over 100 feet deep. From these towers, the wonderful arch springs out and up, and at the crown is 300 feet above the water. It looks quiet and peaceful up there against the sky, but it is all the time pushing against the towers as if 2 giants were thrusting 15,000 tons weights against them in an effort to overthrow them. This bridge was built by the cantilever method. The sides of the arch were built out bit by bit across the river, until only one section on each side was needed to close it. Then the sections of the lower cord of the great bow were floated underneath it on barges. The derricks let down their long ropes, pulled the heavy beams up to their place, and led them there, while powerful jacks bent down the great structure the few inches that were needed to meet the beams. The men drove in huge bolts to pin the parts together, and from the moment the arch was self-supporting and no longer needed the aid of the frames that had been built on land to balance it. Instead of running along on top of the arch, the roadway of this bridge runs underneath it. Heavy girders are used to suspend the roadway from the arch, and these not only carry the weight, but help to stiffen the whole bridge against the force of the winds that swirl down through the narrow end of Long Island Sound. So, I guess I'm going to have to look up a little bit of information here with Andre. Right? So that we can expand on that chapter and sort of understand what I was reading. Honestly, I'm not too sure what I'm looking at. I guess that's what they build in the ground, in the water, before they put their pillars in. All pictures. I'm not going to read it right now, but we'll just look at it, and then that will be the end of this chapter for now. Oops. Lots of them here. That's an interesting one right there. Looks kind of cool. Here's one of your Roman ones. Right. Made in stone. They have remnants of them left. left over from those days. Boy. And this is where we opened up the book. This is where we started. And then it goes into the sun and moon. All right. So there we go. Now I got something to work with Andre. And some other little project there. So I'll talk to him about that the next day or two. And we'll start hunting around how we can make some bridges for fun.